With Rio Bravo and El Dorado, Howard Hawks basically invented a new genre, the siege movie. A misfit group is cast together in a tiny fortress, surrounded by a hostile and often deranged group of enemies. Later siege classics included Assault on Precinct 13, Night of the Living Dead, Lamberto Bava's Demons, Train to Busan, and many, many more zombie films. Rio Bravo and El Dorado have so much in common, it's hard to believe Hawks had the temerity to remake his own movie only 6-ish years later. Same director, same star, same writer, same plot. The good guys capture an important bad guy and have to defend the town jail until the U.S. Marshal comes and end up fighting it out in the streets because the bad guys are quicker than the U.S. Marshal. Same configuration of the team. A stalwart hero, his best friend a drunken lawman, an eccentric war veteran, and a brave young recruit. Plus the sultry widow of a gambler who has eyes on the hero. On the other hand, these two movies are vastly different and both well worth seeing if you enjoy hard-edged thrillers, westerns, or the snappy dialogue of Leigh Brackett.
Well, where are we headed for?
To see a girl.
To see a girl?
Yes, a girl. Don't you think I could know a girl?
Always make you mad, don't I?
I always make you mad, don't I, John T?
I think I've sketched out the plots well enough for you to follow along, so let's look at the films themselves. Rio Bravo is by no means a by-the-numbers western. It begins Wall-E style with a 4-minute wordless action sequence that sets up the characters and plot. Then it leaps into the story, or rather, it leaps into the characters. A lot of the film is spent on the hero Chance nursing his deputy Dude out of an alcoholic stupor, and trying to keep his little family of lawmen together, all while they try to keep a crime boss in jail. Meanwhile, a seductive fugitive, simply called Feathers, rides into town, sparking a Batman-Catwoman-style romance with Chance.
Hey, Sheriff, you forgot your pants.
There are plenty of intense action scenes, but the movie relies heavily on its human side. The story goes that Hawks and Wayne thought the recent Western classic High Noon was too namby-pamby, with a sheriff begging help from all over town. Rio Bravo's sheriff asks help from no one. Chance is mighty annoyed to find out the local hotel owner and Angie Dickinson have been protecting him. Sheriff Chance has a sad little team, Stumpy and Dude. Walter Brennan as Stumpy is irascible and has an itchy trigger finger. Dude is a crumpled alcoholic who used to be a great quick draw. Much of the movie revolves around Chance forcing Dude into sobriety, and Stumpy's frustration with both Dude and Chance at their inability to communicate.
Stumpy, that was Dude you shot at.
Dude? I didn't know. Didn't look like Dude.
Fool almost blowed my head off.
Dude, how'd I know it was you? You get yourself all dolled up like Ash's pet horse and then stick your nose in that door and don't say nothing. How do I know it's you? Tell me that.
Stumpy nearly kills Dude at one point by blasting through the front door, and Dude uses his knowledge of Stumpy's wild side to take out a couple of enemies. The men snarl one-liners at each other like a family at Thanksgiving.
You better...
I know. Get back in my hole.
No, you better watch out for Colorado when he comes back. I forgot to tell him how trigger happy you are.
And their mutual affection manifests itself in a gleeful shootout finale that feels like all the tension of the film suddenly gets released. It's a dysfunctional family film in the end, one with a lot of dynamite.
That was a good one.
The final members of the team include Ricky Nelson as the gunslinging protege Colorado, and Angie Dickinson as Feathers. And yes, almost everyone in this film goes by a goofy nickname. Nelson had come off his years as a child star on Ozzie and Harriet to become a rockin' heartthrob, and you can almost see the studio salivating in excitement at having Nelson on the poster alongside the Rat Pack crooner Dean Martin. Surprisingly, the two only get to indulge in the vocals that made them famous for about 5 minutes.
He'll be waiting.
She'll be waiting.
My rifle, pony, and me.
When the besieged lawmen sing a couple of tunes in the jailhouse. On one hand, it seems like Howard Hawks completely forgets for 5 minutes that this is an intense, emotional action thriller. Or maybe somebody at Paramount made him forget. On the other, the singing is fantastic, and the songs are memorable, even if neither was originally written for this film.
Get along home, Cindy, Cindy. Get along home, Cindy, Cindy. Get along home, Cindy, Cindy. I'll marry you sometime.
Ricky Nelson acquits himself well in what could have been an insufferable too-cool-for-school role. Colorado is smart and talented, and he saves the group more than once, and Nelson pulls it off without ever looking smug. He's the new kid on the block, and Dude's pain jealousy over Colorado moving into the team is one of the saddest parts of the film. I'll get to Feathers later. For now, I'll just say that Angie Dickinson smolders, delivers her lines well, and looks amazing.
Well, thanks.
A few years after Rio Bravo, Howard Hawks, John Wayne, and Leigh Brackett returned to a very similar story. Tough guy, drunk lawman, old codger, new kid, smoldering woman, bad guy locked up, and the marshal coming several days too late. Whereas Rio Bravo cast hip crooners as the greenhorn and the drunk, El Dorado went for an edgy young James Caan as a goofier newbie, the river gambler Mississippi. Mississippi is reckless. He can't shoot a gun, and he wears a laughable hat. But he offers the common sense that the group needs. As for swapping Dean Martin for Robert Mitchum, well, both men knew how to play a drunk well from real life. Martin used to joke that he couldn't understand why they cast him as a useless alcoholic. Mitchum's character is played more for laughs, but both Dude and JT get the best scene in each film, when as worthless as they can be, they hunt down a killer in a bar full of enemies.
You don't look very happy.
I'm certainly not.
Wouldn't you like to move away from that piano, Joe?
You're darn right I would.
Well, then move!
Even from the credits, you can feel the opening up of El Dorado's scope beyond that of Rio Bravo. Credits roll on top of lush paintings by the great romantic Olaf Weghorst, who cameos as Swede Larson, the man who sells Mississippi his sawed-off shotgun. This is a film that dares you to dislike it. On top of everything else, you've got costumes by the giant Edith Head, and a soundtrack by Nelson Riddle, who may have been better in his big band backings for everybody from Frank Sinatra to Peggy Lee, Nat King Cole, Lady Ella, Rosemary Clooney, and Linda Ronstadt. The first half of the film is essentially a lush backstory for Rio Bravo, and it takes place in picturesque canyons and saguaro forests across the Southwest. The characters are expanded as well, in a way. Robert Mitchum's Sheriff JT is introduced as a cool hero before his alcoholism takes over, and Cole, a gun for hire this time and not the sheriff, has a long history with Feather's replacement, Maudie, who is implied to be an ex of both Cole and JT.
I'm awful glad you two are friends.
We may not be when we think this thing over.
If you aren't, I'm through with both of you.
You know something, Cole? I think we better get ourselves a new girl.
Yeah.
You better not.
Why not?
I'm girl enough for both of you. Say, can I buy you a drink?
Arthur Honeycutt is an ex-Indian fighter whose presence hints that Chase, JT, and himself are all veterans of the Confederate Army. Everything's bigger than in Rio Bravo, which makes the film's narrowing scope palpable. We start in the daytime with the whole country available, and find the world closing in at night, until roaming the streets isn't even possible, and an escape to a nearby ranch seems a near miracle. Cole is a considerably more complicated hero than Chance was in Rio Bravo. After refusing to join the bad guy's campaign to run a rancher's family out of town, he accidentally kills the rancher's son, and in turn, he's shot in the back by the rancher's daughter. This turns him into something like the Marvel Comics version of Iron Man, an invincible hero with a piece of shrapnel that's always an inch away from killing him. To say the least, his relationship with the family is complicated. The daughter Joey, played by Michelle Carey, is the volatile center of this relationship, and she serves as a love interest for Mississippi. As always, Howard Hawks knew how to make his leading ladies just scorch the earth. Overall, it's a bigger picture and a funnier one, and maybe I've always preferred it because watching Dude fight through his demons is not Sunday afternoon fare. But let's get to the funny. Nobody compares John Wayne to Humphrey Bogart, but there's a lot of the have and have not in Rio Bravo, and a lot of the big sleep in El Dorado, all of which were directed by Howard Hawks. Each was loosely adapted from a novel or short story. The lead in all four films is a staunch, weary hero in a nowhere town, thrown together with a sultry beauty with a past who's obviously into him. Some viewers have complained that the Angie Dickinson John Wayne romance was unrealistic, and nobody ever said that about Bogey and Bacall, for good reason.
What'd you do that for?
Been wondering whether I'd like it.
What's the decision?
I don't know yet.
The dialogue sparkles, thanks to, in 3 out of these 4 films, the legendary Leigh Brackett, whose competitive back and forth set up the rivalry and affection between the characters.
Are you gonna keep sitting on my stomach?
Oh, well, I'm comfortable, and
I mentioned in an earlier video that it's easy to see a through line from Brackett's film noir scripts to her final work on The Empire Strikes Back.
There aren't enough scoundrels in your life.
I happen to like nice men.
Nice man.
Very nice.
Affection is expressed through antagonism. But watch Rio Bravo back to back with the have and have not, and it's obvious that the Bogart and Bacall, Steve and Slim have parallels in Chase and Feathers. Walter Brennan is essentially the same character, this time imbued with violent tendencies.
Jumping Jehoshaphat. Why don't nobody never tell me nothing?
The parallels between The Big Sleep and El Dorado are even more pronounced. You have the charming, honorable murderer.
Do you mind? No, I'm used to it.
Call it professional courtesy.
who has two useless underlings.
Pedro, Mills, can you hear me?
Hey, is he any good?
Who's Sidney? He's company for Pete.
You even have the "you go out the door first" conclusion from The Big Sleep.
Don't shoot, it's me,
McLeod, would you like to walk out that door first, ahead of us?
Nope. I don't believe I would.
I didn't think so.
Twice.
Don't shoot, it's Mills, don't shoot!
I could try to quote all the fun interchanges in these movies, but that would take us the full 4.5 hours, so save me some time. Go watch the movies for yourself. The one thing that does fall flat a little in El Dorado, besides a John Ford-style comic fistfight, is the crowbarring in of Edgar Allan Poe's poem, which gives the movie its name.
Gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow.
James Caan quotes the poem several times, and each time it stops the movie in its tracks. The one time it does work, and this is not a slam on Caan, who I love in this and The Godfather and Elf, etc., but the one time it does work is when Wayne quotes the poem.
Mississippi, you want to ride, boldly ride again?
The characters don't seem to get Poe's poem at all, except for maybe Cole. Poe's knight in the poem is searching for the fabled city of gold, which the El Dorado country in this film simply is not. It's a hard place, you have to work really hard to get ahead here. And eventually, a shadow tells him that the knight must ride, boldly ride to reach El Dorado. Maybe the streets paved with gold lie on the other side of the valley of the shadow of death. Cole and Mississippi don't seem to be scared of the Valley of the Shadow of Death, but Ride, Boldly Ride has a fatalism to it that only JT, resigned to his own end, seems to get. Brackett said that the original script, which she preferred, had John Wayne die at the end. She accepted the final version, with our two heroes limping along the streets into middle age, and personally, I'm a lot happier with it, even if it doesn't fit thematically. These are two fine films. They are well worth watching, and their similarities and differences really tell you a lot about how a person can age in about 7 years.
While the roller Rio Bravo rolls along, while the roller Rio Bravo rolls